Hello everyone, it's Karen at the Cool Tools Studio. Today we're going to be working with some pigment powders alongside casting resin and molds to make some really fun earrings. Here are the tools you're going to need for this project. Some casting resin, a mini palette knife, a dusting brush, some casting molds, a hand drill with a number 54 drill bit, some flat nose pliers, multicolored jump rings, ear posts and ear nuts, some rubber gloves, and a dust mask. You're also going to be working with these really beautiful pigment powders. These colors are super saturated and they really pack a punch and they're a lot of fun to work with. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and put on my dust mask just because I'm going to be pouncing these pigment colors into the mold and kind of stirring them up into the air. So just as a precautionary measure, wear a mask. And for this project today, I'm going to be walking you through how to apply the color to this kind of monstera leaf. And for that, I'm going to be working with the green and the blue pigment powders. And I always like to start with the lightest color and then move on to the darkest, just because you might kind of retain some of the pigments in your brush and your colors can get kind of muddy if you don't clean your brush well in between or if you start with the darker colors. So these pigments are super saturated and a little bit goes a very long way. So for these earrings I'm going to have green kind of in the top portion of the earring and then blend my way to blue. So I'm going to start off with the green and I'm going to kind of tap my brush to get rid of some because again this pigment goes a really long way, and I'm just going to pounce it into my mold here. I'm going to pick up a little bit more. And now I'm going to start working my way through these leaves. And I'm kind of picking up at this point, I don't know if you can tell, I'm going to kind of pick it up. There's some pigment that's kind of gathered at the corners and the edges there. I'm going to try to pick that up and redistribute it. Because that line will remain in the resin and show up. So you're just looking for a really thin, smooth application, but you'll be amazed at how the resin really picks up the tint all the way through. Now we're going to come over here, work on this one some. There's a lot over there, so I'm going to try to pick it up and bring it over here some. And I'm just kind of blending the green out. All right. I might end up dipping back into the green. I've kind of found that I like to start light to dark, but every once in a while, after I've applied the dark, I have to come back the green. I'm just over here with some paper towel. And I'm just cleaning off any excess pigment off my brush before dipping into that blue. But sometimes, as I was saying, I have to come back into the lighter color again to kind of smooth out the transition. So I've got my darker pigment and I'm starting at the bottom here. And I'm blending my way into this green. A little bit more. And this big broad brush is really perfect for this type of application. I was originally trying this project with smaller brushes and it was really difficult to get a smooth blend, so working with this larger brush makes it much easier. Alright, I'm going to get a little more blue to kind of blend a little more. But you can see how really quickly kind of you can do this with all sorts of different colors and just have a lot of fun with this project. And when you're happy with your blend, we're ready to start mixing up some resin. So today I'm going to be working with this 2-part epoxy resin, and this resin was actually really nice to work with. In the past I've worked with some resins that are really strongly odored, and I've kind of actually had reactions to some of them, but this one did not bother me at all. So I'm really happy to say that this feels like a very friendly resin as far as workability goes. It's a two-part resin, so there's a body to the resin and then there's a catalyst. And you mix them equal parts. So I've got two separate cups here that I'm going to pour an equal amount to. In this case, there's kind of that line that I can see through the cup to see where the pattern ends, and I'm just going to fill it to there. So there's part B. So I'm going to pour out equal part of part A, because it's a 1-to-1 mixing ratio. And then I'm going to be mixing today with this mini palette knife. I really like it because it's got this flat edge and it's easy to scrape the sides and make sure you're really thoroughly combining the materials. I usually just kind of mix back and forth. I'll pour from one cup into the other, mix, and then pour back into the original cup again. That way I can be assured that I'm mixing up all the material that may be on the bottom, sticking to the sides. So I'm doing my best to clean out this one cup. And then combining the two together. And I'm trying not to stir in a bunch of air. This resin does kind of self-level and degas and debubble pretty well naturally. I'm also going to show a little trick to get rid of some stubborn pesky bubbles that you may have. But try not to stir too vigorously. You want to stir thoroughly, but not vigorously. I'm scraping my sides, running along the bottom. So now I'm going to pour back into this other cup. And this resin has a 40-minute work time and a 24-hour cure time. So plenty of time to really, make sure you're thoroughly mixing this. We're not in a rush. So now I'm going to mix in this cup as well. And then we'll be ready to pour it into our molds. So this is looking very thoroughly mixed and I'm ready to pour it. So for this project, I haven't found that starting on one end or the other disrupts the surface or anything as far as the color goes. I just kind of pour from the middle. And kind of work my way out some, but it's self-leveling, so it's going to sneak its way out to those corners and edges. And it can be helpful to kind of get down to the level of your work and check things out to make sure you're not going to overfill or underfill these molds. With these little pieces, it's kind of tricky. Sometimes you can overfill them just because you'll be like, oh, one more drop, and then the drop was a little bit bigger than you anticipated, and then there's too much material. If something like that were to happen, you can use your palette knife to kind of scrape off the excess. And I'll show you that in just a moment. Right, so I'm going to get down, take a look here. And that looks pretty good. So, as I was saying, if you were to overfill one of these, you can just take your palette knife with its flat edge and kind of scrape off the excess. And that's just, if you want a nice flat surface to this, it might kind of settle, and then you'll have some extra, which you can trim away. I just think it's a little bit easier to just scrape it off now instead of having puddles and having to use scissors to cut off any excess. So at this point, it's going to take some time and it's going to kind of settle, and you're going to see some bubbles rising to the surface. So this was a trick that I saw. You can come in with a lighter and use the heat from the lighter to kind of burst some of the bubbles on the surface. And I usually do this right after I pour, and then I'll come back in about 15 minutes or so and check it again for some bubbles that might have been on the bottom and have come up with some time. So you can see how it really quickly gets rid of those bubbles that are on the surface here. And that's just going to help you have some really nice, clear projects. So again, there are some that I couldn't quite reach at this point, but I'm going to give it about 15 minutes or so for those bubbles to come up, and then I'm going to repeat that process. So 15 minutes has passed, and you can see that some of the bubbles that were originally kind of trapped at the bottom have risen up, and I'm going to go over one more time with the lighter to get rid of those bubbles. And it's kind of amazing how quickly they just kind of disappear, and you're going to be left with a really nice, transparent looking piece. All right, I think we got them all. So this resin has a 24-hour cure time, so you're going to want to leave it undisturbed in the mold for 24 hours. So to show you how to finish up this project, I went ahead and prepped another mold, and the resin in this is fully cured. So to remove these pieces, they just kind of pop and pull out. So and again, you can see how just that tiny bit of pigment powder on the top kind of really saturated this piece and made for a really fun color transition. So there are those. Here's another example. Some different colors. And there's kind of infinite possibilities here. You could use the blue and the pinks. Just whatever you like, really. To make some really fun, vibrant jewelry. Thinking these guys would go together. And then here is the blue and pink. All right, but at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and work with these Monstera leaves and show you how I like to assemble these into earrings. So Cool Tools sells these multicolored jump rings, and they're a really fun way to join elements of a piece together with a color that kind of complements your piece. So I'm going to be working with those today. I've picked out a nice green color, and I'm going to be using flat nose pliers to open up the jump rings. These are already open jump rings, meaning that they're cut, so you don't have to cut them or anything, you just have to pull them open. So when you're opening a jump ring, you don't want to pull out and distort the circular shape. You kind of want to bring it past itself and open it up this way. So now at this point, I'm going to slide the top element of my earring onto one side, and then the bottom element of my earring onto the other. And then I'm going to close my jump ring just the same way by dragging past back towards each other. All right, so now for attaching the post to my earring, I like to use a hand drill to drill a little bit of a hole to give myself a nice sturdy position to place my earring post into. So I have a hand drill here, and I'm working with a number 54 drill bit. I chose that because this earring post has this kind of flat pad to the back of it to use for attaching, and I wanted to work with a drill bit that was a little bit bigger than the diameter of that pad. So for drilling this, I actually like to have it nice and flat. It's hard to drill it when the jump ring is kind of keeping this level and wobbly. So raising it up on something so you can keep this top part nice and flat is helpful. So I'm using my plier here, and I'm just kind of figuring out, dragging straight up from there to where I would like to put my post. I'm applying some downward pressure and twisting. Actually, looks like I need to tighten my bit here a little bit. There we go. I'm removing just a little bit of material. And again, this is just to give myself a nice secure connection. We sell some earring posts that have bigger pads that you can glue on, but since these are so transparent, I didn't really like the look of that. So in order to use a smaller base, I didn't feel comfortable just gluing that on. I wanted it to be kind of inset into my piece. So you can see here, how that size just allows you to kind of push down and in. I'm going to drill out a little bit more material here. There we go, that's a nice seat for my post. So now I've got some resin that I've mixed up from earlier, and there's just some on the edge of the cup here, and that's going to be plenty. I'm going to pick some of that up. And then I'm going to push it in. And then when you're applying these posts, it's always helpful to bring them up. And like right now, it's super crooked, but from looking down at it, that looks straight. So really examine your posts at all angles and make sure they're looking nice and straight. So now, again, you're going to allow this to set for 24 hours, and that's going to be a nice, secure connection for your earring post. So here we have my finished earrings. This project is really beginner friendly, and it's super quick and satisfying way to make some fun and colorful earrings. I also really enjoy how lightweight the finished pieces are. They're kind of big statement pieces, but they're not uncomfortable to wear at all. I really enjoyed introducing some color into my work with these resin pigment powders, and I hope you will too. Thanks for watching.